Hello everyone and welcome to today's session, and today we'll be discussing the theory related to the chapter Organism in Population. This is a part 3 of the lecture, and in today's session we'll be discussing NCERT section 11.1. Okay, so this is the disclaimer. So what are the objectives of today's session? So today we will understand the 6 main type of species interactions, which are mutualism, competition, parasitism, predation, commensalism and amensalism. Okay, we'll also talk about the competitive exclusion principle and how species adapt to coexist through resource partitioning. Then we'll differentiate between ectoparasites and endoparasites, and we'll also understand their adaptations and impacts on the host organisms. Then we'll analyze how mutually beneficial relationship develop in nature. Okay, means we'll be talking about symbiotic relationship. Here we will understand these relationships with the help of examples like lichens, mycorrhiza, and plant pollinator interactions. So in today's session, we'll be talking about population, and within this topic, we'll be talking about population interactions. Then we will summarize its entire session. We'll also discuss some NCERT-based questions related to these topics. We'll discuss some keynotes that will help you memorize these topics, and there will be some interesting questions. And with these questions, will enhance your critical thinking ability. Okay, so let's begin with today's session. Let's start with the topic population interactions. Okay, so we will see how different species coexist and depend on each other in their natural habitats. Okay, so let's talk about this natural habitat and species interdependence. Means species, they are dependent on each other. Okay, so no habitat exists with just one species. Okay, so minimum requirement for a species to survive in a habitat is what? At least there should be 2 species. Okay, so at the very least, a species needs another species for the food. It is dependent on the other species. So at least you need 2 species in a particular habitat. Okay, now minimum requirement is 1 more species for food, means at least 2 species, because species, they are dependent on each other. Okay, so organisms, they rely on each other. Okay, so you can see even plants who are autotrophic organisms, they can prepare their own food. These plants are also dependent on other species which are present in the soil. Okay, so soil microorganism, they help to break down the organic matter. So they help in nutrient cycling, and these nutrients, these minerals, they are absorbed by the plant through the roots. So even plants are dependent on the other species like microorganism. Okay, now plant also require biotic agents for pollination, such as bees. Okay, without pollination, there is no fruit set and there is no seed set. Clear? So there will be no reproduction. So again, plants are dependent on other species for pollination. Okay, so survival of the species is dependent on other species. Now, animal, plants and microorganisms form biological communities through interactions. Animal, plants and microbes, they all interact to form biological communities. So these communities, what do you mean by communities? So community consists of population of different species. Okay, so these interactions are like thread in a spider's web. Each one supports the other, creating a strong and balanced ecosystem. Now, remember that even the simplest communities have multiple interaction linkages. These connections make ecosystem resilient and dynamic, allowing them to adapt to the changes. Now let's talk about interspecific interaction, means interaction between the species. Okay, clear? Now These interaction arise from interaction between populations of different species. Now, these interaction can be beneficial, okay, which is marked as the plus sign. In these cases, both species gain something positive from a relationship. For example, a mutualistic relationship. Okay, then you have the detrimental relationship, which is shown by a minus sign. Here, one or both species are harmed by the interaction. Then you have the neutral interaction represented by 0. In this case, one species is unaffected while the other may benefit or may be harmed as well. In this table, you can see types of interactions. So, a positive and a negative sign is also given here. You can see in mutualism, both the interacting partners, they are benefited. In competition, both the interacting partner, they are harmed. In predation, one of the species is getting benefit, other is getting harmed. Same that for parasitism. In commensalism, one species is benefited, another is, there is no effect on the other species. In commensalism, one of the species you can say is harmed and there is no effect on the other species. Okay, what are the type of interaction? We have just talked about the type of interaction. So mutualism, both species are benefited. In competition, both species are harmed. Okay, then in parasitism, there is a benefit to the parasite, but the host is harmed because parasite, it is absorbing nutrients from the host and the host is harmed here. Okay, host loses the nutrients and host may get sick also. Then predation benefits by feeding on the prey. So prey in this case can be harmed or the prey can be killed as well. Then you have commensalism. In commensalism, what happens? One species is benefited and the other species is unaffected. Okay, next is amensalism. So this happens when one species is harmed and the other is unaffected. Okay, let's talk about the predation first. So you can see when a predator eats the prey, it is actually passing along the energy that plant originally captured from the sunlight. So plants are autotrophs. They are producing the biomass. This energy is being transferred to the next level by the consumers. So this step is crucial for moving energy up the food chain from plants to herbivores and then to the carnivores. Examples: tiger and deer. So tiger is a predator and deer is a prey here. So when a tiger hunts and eats the deer, it is transferring the energy stored in the deer's body to itself. Now next is sparrow eating seeds. This is another example. Okay, here the sparrow acts as a predator to the seeds, taking the energy stored in the seed for itself. The next example is, or you can see here, herbivores. Herbivores are also predators. Okay, actually herbivores, they are feeding on plants. So in ecological context, herbivores are also considered as the predators. So when cow eats grass, it is consuming the living plant material and transferring energy to itself. So here cow is a predator. Okay, what are the roles of predator? First of all, they control the prey populations. Clear? So they keep the number of prey in check. Predators prevent overpopulation of the prey, which could otherwise lead to resource shortages. Then they maintain ecosystem stability. So by regulating which species are most common, they prevent any one species from taking over and disrupting the balance. So this makes the ecosystem more resilient. Next one, they help in biological pest control. So another important role is in biological pest control. Now predators naturally reduce the number of the pest, which is especially helpful in agriculture, and there is no requirement of using chemicals, okay, which degrade the environment. They maintain species diversity. So by keeping dominant species in check, they give less competitive species a chance to survive and thrive. Okay, now let's understand this with the help of a case study. So our first case study is about the prickly pear cactus in Australia. Okay, clear? So here, to control the spread of prickly pear cactus, a biological control method was used. Scientists introduced a cactus feeding moth which helped manage the cactus population. So this is a great example of how bringing in a natural enemy can restore balance, much like introducing ladybugs to control aphids in a garden. Okay, so we have already discussed they were controlled by introducing cactus feeding moth. Next is starfish disaster. So when disaster was removed from its habitat, it led to the extinction of more than 10 invertebrate species. Now, why did this happen? This happened because without the starfish, there was increased competition among the remaining species, leading to some being overcompeted and disappearing. Okay, so important. This is a very important predator in American Pacific coast, and removal of this predator led to extinction of more than 10 invertebrate species due to competition. Okay, let's talk about competition in nature. Okay, so let's talk about the Darwin's perspective on competition. So Darwin talked about struggle for existence and survival of the fittest. So he emphasized struggle for existence and survival of the fittest. Okay, he considered interspecific competition as vital for the organic evolution. Okay, so resources are always limited. Okay, so there will be competition among the closely related species. Okay, and the species which is able to efficiently utilize the resources, the species which have traits that give them survival advantage, those species will survive. Okay, it will outcompete the other species. Okay, and these species which is been selected by the nature, this will produce more number of offerings. Clear? So when there is limited resources, there is struggle for existence, and then there is the survival of the fittest. Now, what are the common misconception? So common misconception is that only closely related species compete with each other. But in reality, competition can happen between very different organism or unrelated species as well. Okay, so it is not limited to closely related species, and unrelated species can compete for same resources as well. Okay, example is in South American lakes, both flamingo and fishes compete for the same food, which is zooplankton. Okay, this is an example of competition among unrelated species. Okay, now let's talk about the interference competition. What is interference competition? So this is a type of competition where the presence of one species reduces the feeding efficiency of another, even when resources are plentiful. So you can imagine two animals trying to eat from the same food source. Their mere presence can hinder each other's ability to feed effectively. Okay, clear? So it is a process where fitness of one species is reduced due to presence of another, and this is measured in terms of intrinsic rate of increase. Okay, so scientists often use something called intrinsic rate of increase, or R, which tells us how fast a population can grow under perfect conditions. When competition is strong, the rate goes down because individuals aren't as successful. Okay, so this shows us how important these interactions are for predicting changes in populations over time. Okay, now let's talk about laboratory and the natural evidence of the competition. So let's talk about the laboratory experiment. Okay, so in the lab, scientists can control all the variables. Clear? So these are the laboratory experiment. So this experiment was done by Gauss. So Gauss experiment showed competitive exclusion with limited resources. So he said when the resources are limited, then okay, the closely related species, they cannot coexist indefinitely. Okay, one of the species will outcompete the other. Then there is one natural evidence also for competition. Okay, so these natural evidence, they are not always as clear cut as the lab experiments, but we can still find some clues of competition. Okay, example. What is the first example? Abington tortoise extinction due to introduced goats. So this is a very famous example. Okay, when goats were introduced to the island where Abington tortoise lived, they competed with the tortoise for the food. Now, goats were better at finding and eating the plants, which led to the tortoise dying out. So this shows how competition can have serious consequences in nature. Then example 2 is that of a competitive release. Okay, now what do you mean by competitive release? So this competitive release happens when the dominant competitor is removed. Okay, so when the dominant competitor is removed from the environment, so this allows other species to expand and thrive. Okay, this is known as competitive release. Here the superior species, okay, superior competitor is removed, then the other species that will quickly fill the gap, that will quickly thrive in the absence of that superior species or superior competitor. A great example of this is Cornell's barnacle experiment. So he studied two types of barnacles, Balanus and Chithalamus, and found that when Balanus was removed, Chithalamus could occupy more space. Okay, so this experiment showed how competition shapes where species live in nature. Okay, here Balanus was a superior competitor. So when Balanus was removed, you can say the other barnacle, Chithalamus, it thrived. Its population increased. Now there is one point: the herbivores and plants are more affected than the carnivores. Okay, so herbivores and plants often feel the impact of competition more strongly than the carnivore. This is because they are directly competing for the resources like food and sunlight, which are often limited. Okay, so plants, obviously they cannot move. Clear? So that's why they are more affected by the competition. Okay, herbivores, they are also affected by competition, okay, as compared to carnivores. So they feel the impact of competition more as compared to the carnivores. Okay, because they are directly competing for the resources like food and the sunlight as well, which are often limited. Okay, let's talk about Gauss competitive exclusion principle. So this principle helps us understand what happens when two different species are trying to survive using the same resources like food or space. Now, what is the main statement of this principle? So this principle says that when two species are competing for exactly the same resources, okay, these two species cannot coexist indefinitely. One of the species will outcompete the other. So two species competing for the same resources cannot coexist indefinitely. Okay, the inferior species will be outcompeted by the superior species. Okay, the species which is less efficient or weaker, that will perish. Okay, so competitively inferior species will get eliminated. Now, species can coexist also. Okay, how can they coexist? So Gauss said the species cannot coexist together if they are competing for the same resources, but actually this is not true. Species can coexist. How they can coexist? By resource partitioning. Okay, this is a coexistence mechanism. Okay, now species can evolve to avoid competition. Okay, so they are following resource partitioning. So they are doing this to avoid the competition. So here they develop new behavior or characteristic that help them to use resources differently. Okay, so these species, these two different species, they are following different feeding times. So they are feeding at different times. Okay, for example, some animals might eat during the day while other feeds during the night. So they are avoiding the competition. Okay, so they have different foraging patterns. Their behavior is different. Okay, so two species, they are living in the same area. Okay, but they are feeding at different times. Okay, or they might search for food in different places or in different ways as well. So they have different foraging patterns as well. Okay, let's look at the classical example to make this clear. So Mark Arthur study of 5 warbler species showed that how these birds could all live in the same tree by behaving differently. So each species has its own niche, like feeding in different parts of the tree or at different times, which reduce competition and allowed them to coexist. So Mark Arthur, okay, he was studying 5 warbler species. They were all coexisting on the same tree. So their behavior was different. They were feeding on different parts of the plant and at different times as well. So they were able to coexist. Now let's talk about an interaction which is known as parasitism. So parasitism is a unique relationship where one organism, the parasite, benefits at the expense of the other, which is the host. Okay. Now let's first talk about the evolution and host specificity in parasitism. So parasite life is all about getting free lodging and meals from the host. So it is dependent on the host. It is absorbing nutrients from the host. Okay, so this strategy has evolved because it gives the parasite a big advantage in the survival, allowing it to focus its energy on reproduction rather than finding food for or the shelter. Okay, so parasitism isn't limited to just one group or organism. It has evolved across a wide range of taxonomic groups from plants to vertebrates. Now, many parasites are host specific, meaning that they only parasitize a single host species. Clear? Now, parasite and host, they co-evolve. Clear? So, parasite, it develops strategies to invade the host, to infect the host, and host develops strategies to avoid the parasite. Okay, this is known as co-evolution. They are evolving together. So, they are basically adapting to each other. And this drives evolution. So hosts develop resistance to a parasite, and the parasite often responds by evolving counter mechanism to bypass that resistance. Okay, now what are the adaptation in these parasites? Okay, so first adaptation is loss of unnecessary sense organs. Okay, so these parasites, they often lose senses they do not need for survival because they are living in a protected environment. They are living inside the host. They do not require the sense organ. So this allows them to conserve energy and resources. Then presence of adhesive organs and suckers. So these organs and these suckers help them to stick to the host. Next one is loss of digestive system. So now they are directly absorbing nutrients from the host. So they do not need to digest the food. So they don't need a complex digestive system. Clear? Now they have high reproductive capability. So they can produce a large number of offerings to increase their chances of survival and spreading. Now life cycle of a parasite. Okay, so this is often complex, okay, and involve intermediate host or vectors. So this means that some organisms rely on other species to complete their life cycle. For example, the human liver fluke requires two intermediate hosts, a snail and a fish. So this shows us how interconnected life cycles can be. Now, with each host providing a necessary environment for the fluke to develop and reproduce. Another example is that of malarial parasite, which requires a mosquito vector. Okay, now what is the impact on the host? Okay, so majority of these parasites, they harm their host. Okay, they affect their health and well-being, and they are absorbing nutrients from the host. The host ultimately becomes very weak. Okay, so these organisms can reduce the survival, growth, and reproduction of their host. So host overall fitness is compromised. Okay, so as a result, the population density of the host species can decrease. So this shows us how the presence of these organisms can have a significant impact on the population dynamic of their host. So these parasites, okay, clear, these organisms, they make their host physically very weak and vulnerable to predation. So this vulnerability can further decrease the host population. Now, what are the type of parasite? First are ectoparasite. These parasites live on the external surface of the host. Okay, so they feed on external surface. Examples are lice on humans, ticks on dogs, and copepods on marine fish. Okay, another example is that of a parasitic plant, which is cuscuta. Okay, this plant, this doesn't have chlorophyll. Okay, so there is no chlorophyll means it cannot photosynthesize. It cannot prepare its own food. So it is obtaining nutrients, okay, by following this parasitic interaction. Okay, it relies on the host for the nutrients. It is parasitic on another plants. Okay, another example is that of female mosquito. So this female mosquito, although it is not considered as a parasite, but this female mosquito, this sucks blood from their host. But this interaction is not considered parasite because parasite is totally dependent on the host and parasite lives inside the host. Here this interaction is this is for very small duration. Female mosquitoes, they suck the blood, they get the proteins from the blood, okay, for laying the eggs, clear, but this interaction is for very small duration. So this is not considered as a parasitic interaction. Clear? Now next are endoparasites. So these organisms, they live inside the body of the host. Okay, they are found in liver, kidneys, lungs, and red blood cells. So they are found in these specific organs as well. Clear? Now they have complex life cycle due to specializations like malarial pathogen. It can infect liver cells as well. Okay. So these endoparasites often have specialized stages to move through the host body and avoid detection. Again, example is the malarial parasite Plasmodium. Then they have simplified morphological features because they are living inside the host again. So they don't have well-developed digestive system. Okay, clear? And they have a lot of adaptation that we have already talked about. They have enhanced reproductive potential, means they are producing huge number of offerings to increase their chances of survival and to increase the chances of finding a new host as well. Now let's talk about brood parasitism. Okay, this is a fascinating behavior where the certain birds rely on other species to raise their young. Now here what happens, the parasitic bird lay their eggs in the nest of the host bird. Okay, means the parasitic bird is not building its own nest. It is laying eggs in the nest of other birds. Okay, here the host bird will incubate the, or host will incubate the parasitic eggs. Clear? So here, why the host is not able to recognize the eggs of the parasitic bird? Because these eggs, they look very similar. Okay, so the host, it doesn't realize that these eggs are not her eggs. Okay, clear? because the eggs, they are very similar. So these parasitic eggs evolved to match host egg in size and color. Okay, so this camouflage helped the parasitic eggs avoid detection and rejection by the host bird, ensuring they are incubated and hatched. So all the work is being done here by the host. Okay, example is cuckoo bird parasitizing crow nest. Okay, this is observable during breeding seasons from spring to summer. Here you can see this is the cuckoo bird parasitizing crow nest. Here you can see the eggs, they look very similar in size and shape. Next is commensalism. In this type of interaction, one species is benefited and other species neither helped nor harmed. Means there is no effect on the other species. Example is orchid and the mango tree. Okay, clear? So orchid uses the tree for support but doesn't take anything else from it. Clear? So one species is getting benefited and there is no effect to the other species. So orchid grow as an epiphyte on mango branch. Okay, epiphyte means it lives on the surface of the mango branch without taking nutrients from the tree. And there is no effect happening to the mango plant here. So orchid benefit while mango tree remains unaffected. The next example is barnacles and whales. So barnacles are small sea creatures that need a place to live and whales provide a perfect moving home for them. Okay, so while the whale is moving, these barnacles, they get access to the nutrient rich water as well. And there is no effect to the whale. Okay, so here barnacle benefit by the whale remains unaffected. Next is cattle, egret and grazing cattle. Okay, this is a common sight is farmed rural areas. Okay, now here ergot forage close to grazing cattle. So these ergots, they you can say they are in very close association with this cattle. Okay, so when the cattle is moving, what is it is doing? It is stirring up the insects from the vegetation, and these insects are eaten by these egrets. Okay, so now this movement helps the egrets catch insects much more easily than if they were searching alone, because as the cattle is moving, it is stirring up the insects from the soil. Okay, and these insects are eaten up by the egrets, but the cattle remains unaffected here. Here you can see in this image cattle, egret and grazing cattle. Next example is sea anemone and clownfish. Okay, so now the clownfish lives among sea anemones stinging tentacles. So these tentacles provide protection to the clownfish. Okay, now fish gets protection from the predators. So living among the sea anemones tentacles give fish protection from the predators. Okay, here the predator avoid the stinging tentacles, so fish also gets protection against the predators. Now sea anemone derives no apparent benefit from the hosting clownfish fish, so that's why this is an example of commensalism. Next is mutualism. Okay, here both the partners are benefited. Okay, in this interaction, both the species are benefited. What are the examples? The first example is that of lichen. This is the classical example, the mutualism. Okay, here lichen is an interaction between algae and a fungus. Okay, so now in this relationship, fungus and photosynthetic, this is the relationship between fungus and the algae. Mostly the algae is cyanobacteria. Clear? Here both the partners are getting benefited. Okay, algae can produce food. It is passing the food to the fungus, and fungus is getting shelter. Okay, algae is getting shelter. Okay, and algae is providing food to the fungus, and algae is getting shelter. Now, mycorrhiza. So myco means fungus, rhiza means roots. Here the fungus is colonizing the roots of the plant. Here again both the partners are benefited. So fungi help plant absorb soil nutrients, and in return fungi is getting the food, the organic compound which is produced by the plant by the photosynthesis. Here you can, this image you can see, this is mycorrhizal association. Here the fungi is associated with the roots of the plants. Okay, next example is that of plant animal relationship. Okay, so why do plant need animals? So plant needs animals for pollination. So animal like or insect like bees and butterflies, they act as nature matchmakers. So they carry pollens from one flower to another. So they help in pollination. Without these pollinators, plant won't be able to reproduce. Because if there is no pollination, there is no fertilization, there will be no seed set and fruit set. So plants are not able to reproduce. Okay, they won't be able to survive. Next is seed dispersal. So animal help plant spread these seeds to new places. Okay, so again they are helping in the diversification of the plants. So they can grow in new areas, in new habitats. So they can occupy new areas. So they can spread. Okay, as the seeds are dispersed by these animals. Now usually the plant, they offer rewards to these animals. Okay. Now plant, they provide pollen. So some pollen are edible, and also they provide nectar to the pollinators such as bees. Okay, so bees and hummingbirds, they come for this pollen and the nectars. Okay, and in this process they pollinate the plant as well. So both are getting benefited here. And then they are nutritious food for the seed dispersers as well. Okay, now let's talk about protection against the cheaters. So some animals are cheaters as well, because they you can say they're getting all the benefit from the plants, but in return they are not providing anything. Okay, so you can see some system protect against the cheaters as well. So in nature, certain animals might try to steal nectar from the flowers without pollinating them. Okay, so they are known as the cheaters, pollen cheaters, nectar cheaters. Okay, now co-evolution. What are the example of co-evolution? Okay, so here you can see the flower, the plant and the pollinator, they are also evolving. So co-evolution is when two species evolve in response to each other. Okay, they are adapting to each other. This is known as co-evolution. Example is fig tree and wasp. Okay, this is a very classical example of co-evolution. So now each fig species is linked to a specific wasp species, forming one-to-one partnership. Here the female wasp lay their eggs inside the fig fruit. Okay, and their larvae feed on the seeds of these fig. Okay, in return the wasp pollinate the fig without searching for the egg-laying sites. Okay, so it is getting a place to lay the eggs. Okay, and the larva is also getting the food from the seeds, and in this process the fig plant is pollinated also by these wasps. So both are getting benefited here. So this is the fig tree and the wasp. Okay, this is an example of co-evolution. Both are getting benefit here. Okay, so this is a one-to-one relationship. Specific fig species are linked to specific wasp species. Here female wasp uses fruit for laying the eggs. Okay, so here the wasp is getting a place to lay the eggs, and it is getting, you can say, the larva also feeds on the fig seeds. Okay, now larva also feeds on the developing seeds, and wasp in return, it pollinates the fig plant. Next is example is that of orchids and the bees. Okay, So orchids have developed diverse floral patterns specifically to attract certain pollinators. So this is a great example of coevolution, where two species influence each other's evolution over time. Now some orchids offer no rewards to their pollinators. Okay, but orchids have developed other strategies to attract the pollinators. What are these other strategies? So Ophrys orchid uses sexual deficit. So this means the orchid tricks male bees by mimicking the appearance and scent of a female bee. Okay, now these orchid petal resemble the female bee. Okay, so this visual mimicry is so convincing that the male bees are fooled into thinking the flower is the potential mate. So male bee pseudo-copulates with the flowers, and this process pollinates the flower. Okay, so pollen transfer occurs during the pseudo-copulation. Now, coevolution, it maintains resemblance between petals and the female bee. Okay, because of this coevolution, what is happening? Still the orchid petals, they resemble female bees. Okay, so this is the classical example how you can see the two species are influencing each other's evolution over many generations. Now, if there is a change in the female bee appearance, then what will happen? Okay, then the male won't pollinate. The male won't come for the copulation, and there will be no pollination. Okay, clear? So orchid must also adapt its appearance to keep attracting the male bee. Clear? So both have to adapt. So both are adapting. Co-evolution is occurring here. Okay, this is an image showing you bee. Okay, this is pollinating a orchid flower. Here, this we have already studied. Male bee pseudocopulates with the flower. Pollen transfers occurs through pseudocopulation. Coevolution maintains resemblance between petal and the female bee, and changes in female bee appearance require orchid adaptation. Now let's summarize this entire session. So, we know all species in the natural habitat are interconnected through various interaction, and in habitat at least you require two species. Single species cannot exist. We also talked about the type of interaction, which are mutualistic, competition, parasitism, predation, commensalism, and amensalism. Now, interaction can be beneficial, harmful, or neutral, and they play a crucial role in maintaining ecosystem balance and species diversity. We also talk about the Gauss competitive exclusion principle, okay, which says that two species cannot indefinitely coexist using the same limited resources, leading to either extinction or adaptation. We also talked about the symbiotic relationship, which is also known as mutualism. Okay, here both the partners are being benefited. Okay, we talked about the mycorrhiza, lichens, and the animal and the pollinator interactions. Okay, clear. We also talked about the predator and the prey relationship. We also talked about the adaptations in the predators, in the parasites. Okay, and how these relationships are important to maintain ecosystem stability and evolution. We also talked about this as well. Now discuss some NCERT based questions. So here question number 1 is, in the interaction between cattle, egret and cattle, the relationship is an example of. So what are the options? Mutualism, commensalism, parasitism, and competition. What is the correct answer? The correct answer is option number B, commensalism. So in commensalism, what happens? One organism is benefited and the other is significantly harmed. Okay, it is not significantly harmed, neither it is helped. Means there is no effect to the other individual, other species. In this case, cattle egrets benefit by feeding on insects and small invertebrates that are stirred up from the vegetation as the cattle graze and move through the fields. Now, the cattle movements make these food sources more accessible to the egrets. The cattle, however, do not experience a significant benefit or harm from the presence of the egrets. Next question, according to Gauss competitive exclusion principle. Okay, so options are, so they are asking the definition of the Gauss competitive exclusion principle. Option number A, two species can always coexist if resources are abundant. Second is two species competing for exactly the same resources cannot coexist indefinitely. Option number C, competition always leads to new species formation. And option number D, closely related species never compete. What will be the correct answer? Option number B is the correct answer. A two species competing for exactly the same resources cannot coexist indefinitely. Let's have a look at the explanation. So the principle states that two species cannot occupy the same ecological niche indefinitely. Okay, so two species, two closely related species, if they are, you can say, feeding on the same food, okay, then they cannot coexist indefinitely. Okay, if they are using the same resources, then they cannot coexist indefinitely. The competitively superior species will eventually eliminate the inferior one. So this occurs when both species are competing for the exact same limiting resources. Clear? How the species can coexist? By following the mechanism of resource partitioning. The next question, which is the following, is not an example of parasitism. Options are cuscuta growing on a host plant, lice living on human scalp, orchids growing on mango trees, and tapeworm living in human intestine. So let's have a look at the answer. Option number C, orchid growing on mango tree. This is not an example of parasitism. Okay, this is an example of commensalism. The orchids benefit by getting physical support and better access to the sunlight because orchid is an epiphyte on the mango tree. Okay, it is getting physical support from the mango tree, and the mango tree, on the other hand, doesn't lose anything. It is not affected at all. Okay, the other options are examples of parasitism, where one organism, which is the parasite, benefits while harming the host. Cuscuta is the parasitic plant, lice is an ectoparasite, and tapeworm are the endoparasites. Let's discuss some keynotes. We talked about the species interactions. We talked about this type of interactions. All species interaction can be classified as, okay, so you can give positive or a minus sign, positive for beneficial, minus for the detrimental effect. Okay, so you can say for all the type of interaction you can give positive sign or a negative sign. Clear? Now predation and parasitism involve one species benefiting at the expense of another, but they differ in that predators kill the prey quickly while parasites typically don't kill the host. So parasite, they don't kill the host, they keep on absorbing nutrients from the host. The host become very weak, but usually the parasite will not kill the host. Now competition follow Gauss principle, where two species cannot indefinitely coexist when competing for the exact same limited resources, leading to competitive exclusion. Now mutualism, commensalism are positive interaction where mutualism benefits both these species while commensalism benefits one without affecting the other, like barnacles on the whales. Now there are some interesting questions for you. First question is, in the case of disaster starfish along the American Pacific coast, its removal led to extinction of multiple invertebrate species due to competition. Now using logical principles, explain how the removal of a predator could paradoxically lead to the reduced biodiversity and rather than increased survival of prey species. You have to include concept of competitive exclusion and trophic cascades in your answer. Next question, the relationship between clownfish and sea anemone is commonly cited as example of commensalism, where the clownfish benefits while the anemone is unaffected. However, some ecologists argue that this should be reclassified as mutualism. Critically evaluate both perspectives using specific ecological evidence and principles to support your analysis. Consider how this example highlights the challenges in indefinitely characterizing species interaction in complex ecosystem. Okay, so this was the end of the theory. Now let's discuss the DPP related to these topics. Well, let's start with the first question. So first question is, which of the following interaction is correctly matched with this description? Okay, so you have four options A, B, C, D. You have to choose the correct answer from these options. First option is commensalism. One species benefit while the other is unaffected. Second is commensalism. where both species are harmed by interaction. Third is mutualism, both species are benefited from the interaction. And option number D, competition. Here one species benefit while the other is harmed. So what is the correct answer? Okay, the correct answer will be option number C, mutualism. Here both the interacting partners are benefited. Okay, like you can give example of mycorrhiza. Both the interacting part, the fungus and the plant, both are benefited from each other. Clear? So fungus is providing, okay, it is helping the plant to absorb the nutrients, and plant is providing the carbohydrate to the fungus. Next one, in the context of predation, which of the following statement is incorrect? The first option is predators help maintain species diversity by reducing competition among prey species. Next is herbivores are not considered predators in an ecological context. Third is over-efficient predators may lead to their own extinction due to prey depletion. And the fourth is biological control methods rely on predators to regulate pest population. What is the correct answer? Okay, option number B will be the correct answer. Herbivores are actually considered as predators. Okay, herbivores, they are feeding on the plants. So they are actually predator. They are predating on the plants. So this is known as herbivory actually, which is a kind of predation. Next one, the competitive exclusion principle state that two unrelated species can never compete for the same resources. Next is two competing species will always coexist indefinitely. Option number 3, two closely related species competing for the same limiting resources cannot coexist indefinitely. And fourth one, competition only occurs when resources are abundant. What is the correct answer? Option number C is the correct answer here. So this principle states that two closely related species which are competing for the same limiting resources, means food and space, they cannot coexist indefinitely. The superior species will outcompete the inferior one. Next one, which of the following example of brood parasitism? Okay, mosquito feeding on human blood, cuckoo laying eggs in the crow nest, a tapeworm living on the human intestine, and the last one is an orchid growing on a mango tree. What is the correct answer? Option number B will be the correct answer here. So the cuckoo bird, quail, it lays egg in the crow's nest. So there is a very similarity in the size and color of the, you can say, eggs. So the crow, which is the host, this is not able to differentiate between the eggs. Okay, so all the work is done by the crow here, which is the host. And this cuckoo, this is the parasite here. Okay, this is the parasitic bird. Crow is the host bird. Okay, so this is an example of brood parasitism. So this cuckoo bird, this is not making any nest. It is just laying eggs in crow's nest. Next one, in a fig wasp mutualism, what does the fig provide to the wasp? Shelter from predators, nectar as a food reward, developing seeds for larval nourishment, and fourth one, protection from the competitors. What is the correct answer? Option number C will be the correct answer, developing seeds for larval nourishment. Okay, so this fig is providing, you can say, space for laying eggs, and it is providing seeds for the larval nourishment, and in return wasp is pollinating fig. Okay, so with this we have completed the DPP as well. Okay, so with this we'll end this session. I hope the session was quite knowledgeable for you. We'll meet you in the next session. Thank you very much for listening.